Hey everybody, we're just doing a quick pop-up live. I'm going to go over several different size tumblers and show you how you can use the water slide for the buffalo plaid on most any size tumbler and make it work. And I know I had someone that commented that to size it and make it fit for a cup that's more narrow at the bottom, and I'm going to show you how that works also. So we'll be doing that as well. But first, I had somebody that wanted to see how I get my tumblers, the lines so straight on them, and I'm going to show that right quick. Let me get my tape, and so when I turn you down, I'll be showing that first, and then we'll go on to the water slides. So I'm going to turn you down, and I'm going to see if I can get you pulled up on my computer. It will pull up today. Maybe it hasn't had time. Okay, it's not showing up right now. So anyway, now the first thing, I Sharpie the fine point, and all I do is lay it down on my table, and this is the size I make all of mine. If you wanted to make it bigger, all you got to do is slide something over and hold your Sharpie on something that's a little bit different than that. But for all of mine, you can see the line that it's made here, and I do exactly the same thing around the top. When I put my tape on, I try to put my tape just right above all the way around. And the reason being, when you sand your cup and then you clean off, you want to make sure you go around this rim and clean off. Don't, unless you're using black or navy blue, then that line is going to show. So when you see that, so I would do this same thing to the top, and then I sand it all over, and then I go up when I paint my cup. So that's how I do it, and that's the size I make mine every time I do it. This is one that I've done. You can see the work. Now this one looks a little different because the bottom is shaped different. But that's how I do it. It's very simple, very simple. That's all there is to it. So the water slide, this is how it prints, and there's 7 different stripes on here. And then what I do, this is start out with through, and on the back of it, for these, I put a T to show that that's the top. And then when I start cutting, I cut off, and then I cut all the way across the bottom here. And then I go back and then just cut out the strips. And you don't have to cut right against each strip because it's going to be clear and it's not going to show. And I'll show you how when they overlap, what they do. So I've already got mine cut out, and I'm going to put several. I've got my tub of water over here, and I'm going to go ahead and pour in. I'm going to try to use these same 4 over and over. But what I do to make sure, to get sort of to know how it's going to lay on the cup, and if I'm going to have it any, I just and put it right at the top where I want it to be, because that's where you're going to line it up every time. So very important that you keep it straight, because that is going to determine your cup. It doesn't matter, because when you get through, once this dries, then you'll go back, and with an X-Acto knife you can trim it here on every one of them. But I do, and just sort of place one, and I just hold it in place. Another one here, hold it in place. Another one here, hold it in place. Now this is just to test it, to see how it's going to come out on this size cup. This is a 20 skinny. And this is just a precaution to give you an idea of how it's going to come out and how much you're going to have to do. Now this one I can see it's going to be a little bit short. So what I would do is just overlap every one of mine, just, oh gosh, about that much all the way around. And when you overlap them, then it'll leave enough room right here to put another one like this. And that way that gives you an idea that you've got to overlap it a little bit. And then I'm going to show you how it doesn't matter if it is smaller at the bottom, because if you get that one straight, then each time that you put one beside it, as it comes to the bottom, it's okay for that to overlap, because if you keep these lines straight here and here and here, as it comes down, if it overlaps, that's not going to show, because this is going to go into the dark blue. This is going to be clear, so that's not going to show anyway. So I'm going to try to show that. We're going to see if it's going to work today. And but anyway, this is a 16 ounce. This is a 20 ounce skinny. And this is a 22 ounce, and you can see it's tapered at the bottom too. This one is a 30 ounce skinny, not straight, but skinny. And then this is a 30 ounce. So I'm just going to show you how you can do that on any of the cups. We'll start with this one, and I'm just using these to work on, and then I can go ahead and clean them up after I get through. But this is just to show you how it's going to work. So I'm going to try one more time to see if I can get it pulled up so I can see and make sure I got everything where you can see what I'm doing. And I can't see any comments right now. So if you've got comments, please, just anything that you've got questions about, leave them in the comments and I'll go back and answer them one by one. Okay, now I've figured out how to do it. I've got it now where I can see it. So let me get it pulled up, and then maybe I can see some comments. And you can see it's. Let me turn my volume down now. This one is and these that's like this. They're going to be a little bit different, but I'm going to try to make it work, and we'll see if we can make it work on all of them. But I just leave my paper in there, and then I wet my cup. And you want to line it up at the top, and then you're just going to pull this out from the bottom. And if you line it up at the top, then that's going to make it fall straight, and you can see how it just fell right in line. And I use a brush, and just lightly, just the weight of the brush, basically rub it down the line. And it's okay if this happens down here, because when it dries, we'll go back with an X-Acto knife, and then we're going to trim this right where we want it. So if it's hanging over like this one laps way around, it doesn't matter. That's okay. Now we're going to go with the next one, and you see I got the T on the top, so I'll know, and I'm putting a little bit of water on there. And this one I did not go around and see if it's going to fit, just to save time. But I wanted to do one like this so you can see as it falls straight, it overlaps down here at the bottom. And this I would do against a blue cup, but now it did overlap right in here, and it just automatically falls right in place. You don't really have to work at it. Once you get the hang of it, you'll see you really don't have to work at it. And if I were working on this to keep it on the cup, I would go back and I would use my paper towel, and I would make sure that I dry my brush, rub it down lightly to get the water out of it. I'm not going to do that now because I'm going to try to use these over and over. But so I can show you on each size cup how it works. I'm going to wet this a little bit. Lay it on the cup. Make sure you get it at the top. And line it up side by side. Then just slide that out, and it just lays right down on there. Then you can just slide it over just a little bit to make sure these lines match up. Make sure you line it at the top, and 9 times out of 10, if it's lined up at the top, your starting point, your beginning point, then all of these lines right in here are going to match up. And you can see it's just falling right in place here and staying straight. And it will do that all the way around the cup. And this, remember, line it at the top. Make sure you get it lined up at the top. Okay, I'm pull that over myself. Line it at the top. Just pull this out. And when you got it straight at the top, then it's going to line up and it's going to overlap as it needs to. Okay, and you can see how easy that is, and see how they're just overlapping automatically to fall in place. And you do that all the way around the cup. But now I would do what I showed you in the first step, to put them one by one by one to sort of see how it's going to fit around the cup. I have not tested it to see, but that way then you know if you need to overlap it at the top a little bit in order for it to come out pretty well even. So now I'm going to go back and see if I can take these off. I may not be able to save them, but we're going to see if I can. And I'm going to lay this back in the water so I can use them over, because I don't want to mess up all these water slides. You know how expensive they are to print, the ink as well as the paper. Okay. I took them off of that one. Now that one, I've shown you how it works on it. And this is what I did. I'll see if I can get this to slide over here where I can show you. See, I've just got them floating around in the water. So we're going to see if we can make it work. It may not can, but we're going to see if we can. Okay, remember you always want to start with the solid color at the top. And this one's going to work a little bit different because I'm not pulling the paper off. Now my water slides, I always spray them once with 2 times clear gloss. I let it dry completely, and then I go back and then I spray it again with the 2 times clear gloss. And then once I do that, then I go back after that dries and I spray it with the Plasti Dip. Okay, now that one you can see it doesn't hang over quite as much at the bottom here. But what will happen when this dries, you go right around through here with an X-Acto knife and you cut it. But you don't want to try to cut it until it's completely dry. Completely dry. Go back in with your next one, line it up at the top. Make sure you're lining it up. Put it side by side. And it will fall right in place at the bottom and overlap like it needs to. If you've got this top, if you keep that straight. And you can also see that keeps your lines here and here and here and here straight. Now I'm going to go back with a put a little bit of water on it. Pull this one back out, and you want to make sure you line it at the top. Get it straight at the top. When you get it straight at the top, then it makes the bottom line up the way it needs to line up. But remember, on every cup you do, you can't not do that first step, because that first step lets you know if during this process you're going to need to overlap these a little bit to make it come out right to place your very last one. And like I said, normally I would dry these out, but I don't want to dry them out because I am trying to be able to use them over and over just to save on the paper. and the water slide. Wet it a little bit, and this, of course, you would pull it off of the paper like I showed you in the first steps. And there you go, and you can see as it overlaps, it just falls in place, and where it overlaps, you've got this print overlapping in the dark. Right in here, it doesn't matter anyway because you don't have anything touching it. And of course, you know how different this is when it pops on glitter, a glitter base. So that shows you. And then when it dries, then you go back and you trim this. But remember, always do that first step. Okay, now we're going to take it off this one, and you do that all the way around. But doing it with this size, you can always trim it around the bottom to make it fit any size and any shape tumbler. I think this, the longest one, the blue ones that start with the dark at the top, if I remember right, they're about 9.5 inches long. So as long as you measure your tumbler and make sure from here to here is no more than that, then it should fit. If you have something that's longer than that, say you're doing one of the bigger water jugs, 32 ounce, 34 ounce, then on your paper you can make it longer. You can make it up to 11, almost 11 inches long, and it still print correctly. Just depends on your printer. And these, you can make them, like I use Inkscape to do all of my designs, and with it I can make these any color I want to make them. I can make them blue. If you remember when we did the one on the orange, I made it green, and these are blue, and I've made some that are red. You can make them any color you want to. Make them black. That's the way we did on the one that we did this week for the Mama Bear. Okay, and remember, you want it to start right at the top, and once you get that lined up at the top straight, then it just falls straight on your cup. And again, if I were doing this on a tumbler to leave it, I would go back and wipe this water out, dry my brush off, wipe it out, and keep doing that until I get all the water out of it. But since I'm not doing it to stay, and I'm trying to use this over and over, I'm not going to do that. Put a little bit of water on your cup. Lay your next one on. Make sure you line it up at the top. Remember, when you cut this top, you want to make sure that that's straight, because that's going to be your beginning point on all of them. As you can see, that falls right in place. The lines stay right in place. Where it overlaps right here, you can't even see it. There. Wet it a little bit. Lay the next one on. Make sure you got it straight at the top. When you line it up at the top, then the bottom's going to overlap as it needs to. Okay, you can see where it lines up at the top, then where this needs to overlap, because this is smaller around the bottom than it is around the top. Put the one more on there and show you how it works. And then when it dries, you leave it. Don't get impatient. You leave it and let it dry completely. And then you can turn around and cut it around the bottom with your X-Acto knife. See, it overlaps here, and it makes it fit perfect. It just does it on its own. But make sure this is pushed down around here, And then when it's dried completely, you can just cut it right around where you have your line. If you don't do anything on the bottom, if you do the whole cup, then just let it overlap and then just trim it with the scissors or with an X-Acto knife around the bottom, because you don't want it to overlap over the bottom of your cup. At the top, if you go all the way to the top, I would take it just almost to the top. I would not take it all the way, because you want to make sure that your epoxy is going to cover it if you take it all the way to the top. Now, most of the time I never do take mine all the way to the top, unless the customer asks for it. I'm going to be showing you one. That first one I did, it was all the way to the top. And you could see it and how it fit. And then I'm fixing to do a smaller one that goes all the way to the top. These are holding up pretty good to be doing them over and over and over. I was hoping they would so that we could do that. And it's amazing how different this blue looks on the different backgrounds that we're doing. Okay. Then here is the 16 ounce. This one I took all the way to the top, but at the bottom, I did leave a rim at the bottom, as you can see. So remember, you want to wet your cup down, and you'll start with your solid color at the top. And if I were doing this for a customer, I would make sure that I left about that much at the top. The reason being, that way when you epoxy it, the epoxy will come all the way over the top. And then when it dries, of course, like I said, you can go all the way around and cut it with your X-Acto knife. And remember, if I were doing this and putting it on the cup to stay, I would keep brushing this down, drying my brush on a paper towel, brushing it down again very lightly, and that's what pulls all that water out. Now be sure any questions that you got, to make sure you put them in the comments, and I will go back when the live is over and I'll answer all of them. And if we need to, we'll go in and we'll do another short live to clear something up that maybe I didn't explain good enough. But you can see how that's starting to overlap just a little bit down here, but you don't even notice it. But as long as you get the top straight, then the bottom is going to overlap as it needs to. Just got to make sure you get that top straight every time. When you line it up straight, then that bottom just falls right in place. You can see this is looking pretty on this cup. This might be one you'd be pretty to leave it on. And you want to make sure there's water on your cup, because that's what makes it so much easier to work with. Line it up at the top. You get it straight at the top, then it overlaps just like it needs to at the bottom. And when it overlaps, it's just not going to show. And you can see how I've lined all these up around the top. And it's very important when you're cutting them to make sure you've got that top part straight. But you can see how it overlaps, and it's working fine. Now if I can go back and see where I overlap these, don't want to tear them. Get them back in the water. And as you can see, using the 2x Rust-Oleum clear gloss, do that twice, let it dry in between each coat, and then I go back and do a Plasti Dip clear, let it dry, and then I go back and do one final coat of the 2X and let it dry. And you can see these are holding up really well. for me to be working with them over and over and over. Okay, now this one is a 20-ounce skinny, but it does taper at the bottom. It's not a straight, it's just a 20-ounce skinny. So I want to start with some water on my cup. This one was one that I did, that was a dirty pour. Hadn't put anything on it yet. Right there, that corner's curling in, so I'm straightening it out. Let me get it in the water again. Okay, there we go. That top is very important. You got to have it straight, because that's what you're going to line it up. That's going to make everything fall in place. And it is a little bit easier to do when you're doing it with your paper still on the back. It does make it fall in line a little bit better because you've got that slick paper that you're pulling off. Okay, you can see how I lined it up at the top, and it made it just fall in a straight line. And then you put this one on. Make sure that you line it up at the top. When you make sure it's straight at the top, then remember it makes all of these lines fall right in place. Then slide your brush down. And remember, if I were doing this on a cup, that I was going to leave it on there, I would keep sliding my brush, drying it on my paper towel, sliding my brush, put a little bit more water on it, put the next one on. Make sure you line it up at the top. Once you get it lined up at the top even, then the rest is going to fall in place. Even though it's tapered at the bottom. But that first step, remember, it's very important that you go around your cup, fix one that's stationary like I did with this little clip, and then just go around and measure, and then that way you know how much you may need to overlap each time. Usually it's not more than about 1/8 of an inch, or not even that much, maybe even 1/16 of an inch. Okay, you line that up, and once that's lined up, then the rest of this falls right where it's supposed to fall to keep it straight. Okay, and you can see, doing it that way, all of these lines line right up every time. And then, like I said, when you're done, let it dry completely. I would let it dry for several hours, or even maybe overnight, just to be safe. There's no need in rushing it. And then right around where I've got this silver line, that's where I would trim it with my X-Acto knife. But you want to, as you're getting the water out, make sure you push this down and make sure it's dried and clinging well, so that when you go to cut it with the X-Acto knife, then it's not going to mess it up. You'll have it to where you can cut right around it. And I hope this was helpful. This one, it looks pretty with the blue on it too. It's even though it's got all those different colors of the green under there, it makes that blue sort of pop. It doesn't look royal blue anymore, it makes it look navy blue. But if you've got any questions, then leave them in the comments, and I will go back and go over it. So we went over a 20 skinny, which is still tapered a little bit at the bottom. We went over a 16 ounce. We went over a 22 ounce that's tapered at the bottom. We went over a 30 tall skinny, which still tapers a little bit at the bottom. It's not a straight. If it's a straight, it's going to be easy anyway. And then we went over a 30 ounce and showed you how it fits on that and tapers. I mean, when you start it at the top and keep it straight at the top, then it makes them overlap just like they need to overlap to make it fit that cup. And I'm going to go over, let me get these off, and then I'll go over one more time how we did to line it up and make sure you've got it straight to begin with. I may go back and put that on. I think I may put it on this one and leave it on it. But for most cups, you're going to need at least 2 of the sheets. I always, when I'm doing them, I do 3. Just to make sure I have what I need to finish the cup in case one tears. You never know what's going to happen with them. You know, this, I was very fortunate because all these, as many times as I've taken it on and off of this cup, they're still holding up. So that's the good thing. I saw one that at the top a little bit, it was starting to deteriorate a little bit. But let's see, let's go back around this one. We'll do this one this time. And let me get my hands dried off so I won't mess up my water slide. Okay. Start with this, and you want to put it right at the top where you're going to have it. Now this one, as you can see, it has just a tiny bit of silver around the top. This one was done with washi tape. And then I just sprinkled a little bit of glitter on there to add a little bit more to it. And I wanted at the top where the washi tape was, I wanted just a little bit of space so that the epoxy would come over the top. But you can see I've got this lined up now with where that little bit of silver shows. And then I'm going to go with, let me dry this off. Just a minute. That way I won't mess up this that I'm using. Okay, so we've got our starting point. And we're going to go with this one, and then we're going to go with one more, hold it in place, and one more, hold it in place. Now remember, this is one of the most important things to determine if you're going to have to overlap these any more than just normal. Have to go all the way around your cup like this, and I know this takes a lot of time, but it saves a lot of heartache too. Hold it in place, hold it in place, hold it in place. And like I said, I know this part, it seems like you don't need to do it, but it's very important that you do. And when we get around to the end of this, you'll probably see why and see a little bit more about what I'm talking about. But it will give you a good idea if it's going to fit perfect, or if you're going to have to start, you know, if it doesn't, then you may have to overlap this about that much on each one to make it fit, and do it on your own as you're doing each one of your stripes. Now folks, it looks like this one's going to fit pretty much perfect. So you can see the difference there, so you might want to just every once in a while overlap it just a hair, not much at all, because if it fits perfect, you can see right here where it's going to overlap here. And rather than have this, and that would be fine, but you'd have one that's going to be a lot smaller than the others, about 1/4 of an inch smaller than the others. That's about 1/4 of an inch. So you'll want to just every once in a while overlap it just a hair to make it fit and come out correct on this one. But that step is number 1. That's the first step, and it's very important that you do that step. And then the next step, remember, when you cut this across the top, make sure this part, considered your top, is cut very straight, because that's going to determine how it falls on your cup. And then I always turn it over, and on these stripes I always put the top there, so I know which one goes next. But then when you trim them off, you're just going to have a bunch like this that's just cut. And then when you put them in your water, then that way always make sure you start with your darker one. Make sure you line it up right at the top. If you're going to go all the way to the top of your cup, still leave just a little bit of a lip there, so when you do your epoxy, it will come over it. But now, like me, on most all mine, I've got this line to go by, because I always leave that silver line at the top unless the customer just asks for it. But if you do that, then it's going to fall right in place when you pull this paper off. And then do that all the way around. Make sure you always line these up right at the top. Well, okay, I hope that was helpful, and that shows you how you can use this one sheet to do all your tumblers. And it's long enough that once it dries, then you go back around the bottom and trim it with an X-Acto knife. And even if you were going to do it, let's say you were going to do it on this one, and you were going to do it top to bottom, and you took it to the top, then it's still long enough if you take it all the way to the top or bottom. Even if you didn't tape this off, it would still come down and overlap enough that then you could trim it later. So if you took it to the top, except for leaving just a little bit of a lip so that when you put your epoxy on, it will go over it, it will work on that. And I'm not sure about a 32 ounce. I don't have one here. I've done several, but I've sold them. They've already left. And those I order special because I don't have very many people ask for them. But the ones that I sell a lot of, I try to keep those in stock. But anyway, I hope that was helpful, and I will go back and answer any questions that you've got, and I'll get you some answers. And then Monday, we're going to be doing some man glitter. So y'all join in Monday, and we're going to see what man glitter looks like on a tumbler. Talk to you later.